Good evening, and welcome to another pontificating version of Diatribes from the Voice of Doom. Now here's your punctilious and punitive host, Voice of Doom. Hello. Alright, I figured I'd do a diatribe because although nothing really important is happening, a lot of things are happening. And it could be a harbinger of doom, which is my forte and what I'm known for. So I will talk about some things that are going on. Pope Francis died on Monday, I believe it was, the day after Easter, and the day after he met with J.D. Vance, our vice president. And there's people already floating conspiracy theories that Vance had something to do with his death, so whatever. But Pope Francis died. Now, I immediately thought of the prophecies of Malachi, who was some 6th century prophet who foretold the names of all the popes from the time that he was living all the way up through till today. And the fact of the matter is that he said after Pope Benedict, there would be Petrus the Great, a reincarnation or what have you of the first pope, the Apostle Peter. And that after that, the Armageddon and the Judgment Day would come and it would be the end. So when Pope Francis died, I hearkened back to those prophecies. And the way I figure it, I like my countdowns. I like to always set a date for the end of the world or the end of civilization as we know it. And the next 2 to 3 weeks could be very interesting because here's the way it goes. A pope dies and he lies in state for a few days. And then they have a very big ceremony, funeral, pomp and circumstance. And after that time of mourning is over, then they have what they call a conclave, where the cardinals gather. And I guess they made a rule that if you're over 80, you can't vote, which I don't understand, because when you're a priest, it's a lifetime commitment. So for them to say, if you're over 80, you can't vote, I don't understand that. But there's a lot of things about the Roman Catholic faith that I don't understand. But the way I see it, there's a very good chance that they won't come up with a new pope. And that will throw the world into chaos, because they won't be able to name another pope. Now, if they name another pope, then I guess this Malachi guy only decided to make prophecies about all the popes up to Benedict and Petrus. And after that, he got tired of it. And we will keep having popes into infinity. But there's a very good chance that it could be the end of the world coming. And there's many things happening in the world that make me believe that that could happen. And I don't want to get too deeply into my opinion on the Roman Catholic Church, because it's just going to create unrest. And I only have 1 or 2 people that actually listen to my crap, but one day people will hear it. I don't know what will happen, but I'll create an uproar, because I just don't think that the Roman Catholic Church has the karmic wherewithal to be considered a viable source of spiritual comfort. And I could tell you about the Spanish Inquisition. I could tell you about many, many corrupt popes. I could tell you about their thirst for power and riches. And I could tell you about recent things that have come up regarding the behavior of priests. And I'm not going to get into it. You can draw your own conclusions, but I just don't think it. I think it was what Buddhists would call a provisional teaching, right for a certain period of time, and not necessarily right for today's age. I know that people are devout, and I don't want to disparage their faith. My faith is very hard to believe and hard to understand, but we haven't had a preponderance of deviant behavior in our organization. There's been a few. There's always a few. But I think it all stems from the fact that priests don't marry. And I think that goes against God's design. But let's not get into that. I wanted to do a thing called D as in dumbasses, because the D's seem to be going from bad to worse as far as their strategy toward trying to win over the American people so they can start winning elections again. And they are just tearing each other apart. I'm loving every minute of it because I don't like them, and I don't even see any reason why the Democrat Party should exist, because they're a criminal organization and they should be prosecuted under the RICO Act. But just a lot of things are happening because they're in disarray now. Of course, we all know that Von Holland and now a whole cadre of emissaries have traveled down to El Salvador to try to expedite the return of a certain illegal migrant who was deported and ended up in that prison. Now, I've already talked about that. Due process. We don't care about him. We don't care what he's done, but he deserves due process. That's part of the Constitution. And I'm not going to go into what everybody else has been saying. Due process is a constitutional right for American citizens. It doesn't apply to illegal aliens. And the utter duplicity and impunicity of the D's who he's deporting people when Barack deported 3 million people, and they didn't say boo about that. Or the duplicity and impunicity of Hillary, who was preaching about how illegals should not be allowed in this country and they should be deported forthwith. And she was very acerbic and stringent about it. Well, now, of course, everything's different, because since Orangey is deporting, it's a it's a dictatorship, and he's not following the law. All right, we all know that's idiotic, but how are the D's being idiots, dumbasses, in other ways? Well, we have a new order of D's, a certain wing, which is basically the dominant wing, which is radical, progressive, wokester, dumbass idiots who don't know anything. And some of them that are older than the hills. And they come from Vermont, and they talk about how all the rich should give up all their money, and that would keep the United States going for 2 or 3 days. Or young bartenders who are very popular now, who are raking in tons of cash because she wants to make a play for the Senate, and she probably wants to be president. eventually. And we have other people who are Jasmines, and they're just idiots, and they're all idiots. But they're fighting amongst each other, and AOC hates Fetterman because Fetterman makes sense, and he is, actually a middle-of-the-road D who will say, this makes sense. He's not just going to be a knee-jerk reactionary. And then we have this Hogg guy who's a young wokester, sounds like a total idiot, who says, I'm going to primary all the old Ds because we need new blood. So he's the head of the DNC now, and he looks to be about 22. And I don't think he has much brain capacity, but if he wants to tear everything apart, let him do it. And then we got old snakes like Carville, who is a snake. I mean, you can tell that he's lived billions of lifetimes slithering on his belly, and finally he was reborn as a human being so that he could become the campaign chairman for Bill. And they're all just corrupt to the bone, and they're evil. But Carville hates Hogg, and AOC hates Fetterman, and they all hate each other, and now they're new. Here, get this. Here's their new plan of action. Since Orangey is such a rude person who just says anything, let's try to copy him, only we'll be more rude. Let's use a lot of curse words because people like curse words. You notice all these so-called comedy talk shows or whatever, and the audience is sitting there, and then whenever someone uses a F word or A word or whatever word, they all erupt into applause because it's so funny when these people swear. I've never been into cursing particularly. It slips out, but it's just a low level of communication. But now these Ds want to use that as their new shtick. Like if we just say F him and F that, and this is BS, and using the actual words, which have to be bleeped out on the major channels and can only be used on YouTube, because Megyn Kelly swears a lot, and I don't really care for it, but she can get away with saying that on her channel. But these Ds think that it's going to be real cool, win over the people that don't vote, because they can't find their way to the voting booth, or they forgot to register, or they didn't have ID because they couldn't figure out how to get one. So they're tearing each other apart, and I'm glad to see it. I hope they render themselves into atomic particles and float off into the ether, because I don't like them. So they're going to use swearing as their new platform in their foreign and domestic policy. Last thing on the agenda is this, what's his name? Anthony, who was a person of color who got into a little fracas with a Caucasoid at a track meet, and instead of just letting it go, he stabbed the guy to death. And it's funny because when you have a white on black crime where someone dies and the white perpetrator is the aggressor, then you're going to have rioting and cities burning down, and you damn well better convict that guy, because he's a representative of white supremacy and the whole 9 yards. Now when you have a person of color who stabs a white guy, then the person of color is the victim, and they managed to do it. And the funny thing is, and the ironic thing is the people that are bitching the most about this whole thing are people of color who are saying we're getting sick and tired of being, patronized and being talked down to as if we're always going to be the victim, whether we're the perpetrator or whether we're the actual victim. We're always the victim. And I guess the family of this Kamala Anthony guy got hundreds of thousands of dollars on some sort of GoFundMe thing, and they are living high on the hog because their son killed some white guy. So we're going to be very interested to see how this plays out, but you can see the madness, and it's very possible that there will be no more popes. Not that I care. And that the end times are nigh, and we will soon be seeing Jesus and his angels coming out of the sky to cast judgment on every one of us. So I'll leave it there. I think that was enough for you to think about. And enjoy what's left of history. Good night.